Hello and welcome to the WRAP, WRAL State Politics Podcast. I am Will Doran here with my colleague Paul Spey. It has been a little over a week since CNN dropped its big report on Mark Robinson. We have been following that with updates just about daily, not just on the Robinson campaign, but crucially on the impact it's having on other races up and down the ballot. Is this going to affect Trump's chances of winning North Carolina for the third straight time? Is this going to affect Republicans' chances of keeping their supermajority in the state legislature? Very key questions that are still largely unanswered, but starting to come together with some new polling we've seen. Paul, you have done quite a bit of work to get some big scoops on this. Robinson staffers resigning was a scoop that you got. Some other work. Tell us about how this started coming together and some of the fallout we have seen in the last week or so.
Right. What was interesting to me is that the CNN story posted it on Thursday, but you and I both, and many people in North Carolina politics started hearing rumors of some bombshell story coming out the day prior, like on Wednesday, the day before the story actually came out. Man, things started circulating. We got texts of people asking if it was WRAL with this story, and wondering if we knew what it was, and of course we didn't. And then about what an hour or two before CNN even published its story, Mark Robinson posted a defense of himself in a video on social media, saying what you're about to hear is all lies, scandalous tabloid lies, and so on. And so the story comes out, and then we've seen people, when I say people, I mean Republican candidates up and down the ballot, distance themselves from Mark Robinson. That includes President Trump, who spoke in Mint Hill this week at a rally. Robinson did not join him, although they've shared many stages over the last couple of years. President Trump, Former President Trump, has referred to Robinson as Martin Luther King on steroids, and things like that. Obviously, he's heaped praise on him in the past, but to date, it's now been over a month since they shared a stage together. When asked about Robinson's scandal, Trump's campaign sent us a statement that did not mention Robinson at all. I believe Thursday or Friday, Trump was asked by a reporter his views on the scandal, and he said he wasn't familiar with the details. I'm paraphrasing. And so Trump himself is distancing himself down the ballot. Candidates for the other statewide seats, like labor commissioner, things like that, and legislative candidates are deleting photos that they had taken with Robinson. And some have put out statements calling for him to address the issue. Now, very few Republicans have actually called on Robinson to drop out. I believe there may be only one at this point. Now, don't hold me to that. Scott Lasseter, a candidate for state senate, I called on him to drop out. The biggest name is Tom Tillis. U.S. Senator Tom Tillis is a Republican. He's been a critic of Robinson's in the past, and he gave Robinson until Friday I forget his exact wording, but to address the issues, or else, Tillis said, Republicans should move on. They should focus their efforts on other races. And some people are already doing that. The Republican Governors Association had booked a bunch of pro-Robinson ads in North Carolina through Tuesday, this past Tuesday. And when we reached out to them, they said they have no more ad space booked for Robinson going into the future. So people are distancing themselves. Republicans are. Major political groups are pulling support. And Robinson presses on, though, continuing to deny that it was him who made those comments on the CNN website.
Well, and we've seen, you know, even as he's making these denials, almost his entire campaign staff quit, and half of his staff in the lieutenant governor's office quit. And these come after a story that you reported that said his supporters had offered him help getting in touch with IT specialists to prove his claims that these comments he allegedly wrote weren't actually him, and he declined that help.
That's correct. And I sort of summarized what's happened. I should have, it might have been more appropriate to give a timeline. The story came out Thursday. Other people distanced themselves. Sunday, WRAL reported a sort of how we got here story. Like, how did someone who said so many things, controversial things about women, the LGBTQ community, and Jewish people, and so on. How did he get this far without being vetted? If you read our Sunday special about Robinson being, quote, a ticking time bomb, as former Governor Pat McCrory put it, you'll see what his former opponents had to say. So then I believe it was Monday we got a scoop that sources familiar with the matter said that Robinson was approached by supporters who said, "Hey, we'll pay to hire IT experts and legal experts so you can track down who it actually was that posted these explicit comments on that website, that pornographic website." And he rejected those offers. I believe it was the same day, the very same day, if not the day after, Robinson announced that he had hired an attorney named Jesse Binal. He is appears to be a conservative. He's taken up other uh, uh, sort of right wing clients, including former President Trump, in some of his cases about um, the 2020 election purportedly being stolen, which of course is false and has been debunked. We haven't heard from him though. Robinson said Binal was going to dig into these allegations and investigate them, and that he would, take whatever legal matters were necessary. We've not heard from Binal yet. It's Friday morning. He's had a few days, not a full week, but a few days, and we haven't heard from Binal yet. And then on Monday, I'm sorry, that was Monday or Tuesday. Wednesday, we learned that half of Robinson's state government staff quit in the lieutenant governor's office.
Yeah, there's clearly a lot of you know, questioning about, people's own futures. And I think it's been pretty notable the statements that we've gotten from some of our top Republican leaders here in North Carolina, even though no one has rescinded their endorsements of him. Some people never endorsed him in the first place, like Tom Tillis, who you mentioned earlier. But a lot of times when you hear scandals, people say, "Oh, I don't know anything about that," or just decline to comment. But we saw a lot of people. U.S. Senator Ted Budd, U.S. Representative Richard Hudson, who leads the National Republican Congressional Committee, come out and say, if he's going to take this stance of denying it and say that this was somehow some sort of computer hacking or artificial intelligence situation, he needs to provide some more details if he wants voters to believe him. I mean, we saw multiple Republicans came out and say that publicly, which is not exactly what you would normally expect to see in a scenario like this. To press
Right.
someone in their own party to say, all right, if this is going to be your story, you need to do more to convince voters that that's actually true. So it'll be interesting to see what, if anything, his new lawyer is able to come up with in that regard. If they do end up uh, suing CNN or sending some sort of cease and desist letter or what have you, laying out some of the details why they believe that. Uh, it is incorrect to say that these posts were made by him. But so far, we have not seen that. We're recording this around lunchtime on Friday. So
Right. I think that speaks to uh, the year and the month that we are in currently. So, what, 5, 6 weeks before an election is when this story broke. And if, let's say, this was 3 years ago, we may have seen, in the after an election, everyone's in the middle of doing their jobs that they were elected to. We may have seen more people just come out and join Robinson and saying like, "Hey, this is BS. This is slanderous or whatever." But we're North Carolina is one of the most important states in the presidential election, and Republicans are very eager to keep a supermajority in the state legislature, so they can, push through their agenda in state government as much as they want. Um, And in order to do that, they need moderate voters. They need people in suburbs. They need people who are not part of the Republican base, who don't go to the, Moore County Republican luncheon or whatever. They need people who, you know, they could convince to vote one way or another. And so they can't come out. They're not in a position where they can come out and just deny it, because I imagine there are a lot of people uh, who have even voted Republican historically who believe the CNN report.
Yeah, and I should note we do have different maps this year for the legislature that are a little bit more favorable to the GOP than they were in 2022. However, currently Republicans only have that supermajority by one seat in the House and one seat in the Senate. And in the past, when they haven't had that supermajority, Democrats have been able to uphold all of Governor Cooper's vetoes. So, it's not like Democrats have to flip a dozen seats all across the state to break that supermajority. They need to flip one seat in one of the chambers.
Right. And
And there's not a ton of competitive seats. There's a few here in the Raleigh suburbs. There's out in Wilmington, a couple competitive seats in the Charlotte suburbs, or some spots in Eastern North Carolina. But there's really only a handful of competitive districts, and so not a lot of chances for Democrats to make that flip. But all they need is one.
right. And we should point out too that Democrats were already trying to tie those legislative candidates to Robinson even before this scandal broke. And that's because abortion is, I would say, the top issue that Democrats are running on. Last year, after obviously the Supreme Court changed the laws in our country, states were able to tighten abortion laws as much as they wanted. In North Carolina, they imposed a new ban that starts at the 12th week of pregnancy. That The Republicans up at the Capitol in Raleigh will say it's a compromise bill. They couldn't get anything else passed at the time because some of their members are in moderate districts around Charlotte, around Raleigh, Winston, place like that. But Robinson, for his part, has a long record of saying abortion is murder and that he wants a heartbeat bill and things like that that are pretty controversial. And so, even before the CNN report broke, Democrats were saying, fairly or unfairly, that hey, this Republican legislative candidate, they will do whatever. If Mark Robinson's the governor, they will do whatever he says. They will vote however he wants. And now they can take it a step further. They can say, hey, look at this candidate who took a picture with Robinson once. Robinson has, on that porn site, allegedly described himself as a Nazi and said that slavery wasn't so bad, allegedly. So he was already a target of Democrats and someone they were using to smear other Republicans with. This scandal makes Democrats' job that much easier.
Yes, obviously some of it may already be baked in because, like you said, a lot of these comments of his, were, the themes were there already. He had made statements along these lines before. Obviously, what CNN unearthed was, you know, degrees worse, but it wasn't shocking to a lot of people who have closely followed politics. And I think there's a silver lining here for Republicans. We actually saw this Friday morning in a new Meredith College poll that just came out. It was really interesting. It polled people during the time that the CNN report came out. So about half of its responses were before the CNN report and about half the responses were after. And before the CNN report came out, Stein was leading Robinson by 8 points. After it came out, the poll found Stein had a 13-point lead. So pretty decent amount of people, switched off of supporting Robinson in the just hours, days after that CNN report came out. But the other thing that poll found, a dead tie in the presidential race here in North Carolina. Both Trump and Harris at 48% of the vote, 2% undecided, 2% saying that they like Jill Stein, Chase Oliver, or some other third party candidates. So I think that is probably the best possible news that Republicans could hope for from this. I mean, like you said, Democrats are really hoping to tie Robinson to Trump, to all of these other candidates. And I don't get the sense that that's necessarily working yet. Now, I've got to say, the Democratic Party did, after the CNN report, ramp up those specific efforts here in North Carolina with ads about Trump's past support of Robinson, with billboards all over the state showing, Trump embracing Robinson and, quotes about how great he thinks he is. So, we could still see some shifts on that as that messaging reaches more voters that wasn't necessarily reflected in that poll. Um, but for now, at least, it doesn't seem that Robinson is dragging down Trump nearly as much as the Democrats want him to do. Because, like you said, North Carolina is kind of the linchpin to this presidential election in a lot of respects. There are 7 swing states in the US right now. Biden won 6 of them in 2020, all of them except for North Carolina. So, what that means is that if Harris is somehow able to flip North Carolina, Trump has to flip multiple other swing states if he wants a chance at winning the White House. It's not just that, oh, well, Trump can flip Georgia this year. If Harris flips North Carolina, that doesn't matter. Trump would have to flip Georgia and then maybe also some combination of Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. Um, and Trump basically acknowledged that when he was in Mint Hill on Wednesday. He said, "We've got to win if we're going to go all the way this year. We've got to win North Carolina." So, he knows it. And the Democrats know it too. It's going to be a really tight race here, especially if polls like this turn out to be true, that it is still tied 48 to 48. I mean, in both 2016 and in 2020, Trump won North Carolina with less than 50% of the vote due to third party support.
Right.
And it's going to be a nail biter yet again. Democrats are obviously hoping that the Robinson effect gives Kamala Harris that boost that she needs to essentially lock down the presidency. But from the polling we've seen so far, I'm not sure that it has had quite the effect that they're hoping it will.
Right.
Obviously, still what, a little over a month left. Early voting hasn't started, but mail-in voting has. A lot of people may have already sent in their ballots if they're voting by mail this year.
And you don't have to take our word for it that this is an important state. They're here. The candidates and the run and or their running mates are here about every week, and Republicans and Democrats both know the margin is going to be very small. As you mentioned, in 2020, it was 75,000 votes. That equated to about 1.4 percentage points that Trump won by. And in the meantime, you've reported on this. Republicans have been suing the North Carolina Elections Board, what, 3 or 4 times now, to
At
try to
least,
to chip away at the number of the people on the voter rolls. They've claimed that. Well, you can. This is where you should explain
yeah,
what.
there are, like you said, at least 3 or 4 different lawsuits by the GOP here in North Carolina that are looking at all sorts of different ways to essentially, cut down on either the ease of voting or the number of people who are able to vote. There's one lawsuit that seeks to scrub nearly 250,000 people off the voter rolls. This comes after the state Board of Elections recently announced that it has already done its own work to scrub about 750,000 people off the voter rolls. And this is for routine things, people who have died or who have moved out of state or who have been convicted of a felony, things like that, just the automatic work that the state does. They have removed about 750,000 people in the last year and a half or so. Republicans are seeking to remove another basically 230,000 people. In one of their lawsuits, the State Board of Elections contends that that would be illegal for them to do because of federal law. There are also lawsuits that basically take up the argument of the SAVE Act. If people have been following that from national politics, claiming that states haven't done enough to stop non-citizens from registering to vote and to potentially take some people off the rolls due to that. I actually reported on Thursday that the state has done some additional work due to a new state law to look at uh, people who are registered to vote, but who have previously gotten out of jury duty by claiming that they were a non-citizen. Out of our
Why didn't
7.7
I think of
million.
that? Jeez. You just gave people some ideas, except until they hear about the trouble they might be in.
Exactly, exactly. Don't lie on your jury forms, folks. But out of our 7.7 million registered voters in North Carolina, they have so far found 9 people who checked that they should get out of jury duty because they were a non-citizen, and that's with 98 out of 100 counties reporting. So, that number could go up, and obviously it could go up in the future if more people continue making that claim. But for right now, 9 folks out of 7.7 million, and there's an investigation underway to determine if they actually are non-citizens or if they were just thought that they had an easy way out of jury duty by telling a lie on the jury form. We don't know yet, but investigations are underway. And obviously, if you are a non-citizen who registers to vote in North Carolina, that is a crime. Uh, do not do it. But yeah,
Come up with some other way to get out of jury duty, not this one.
or you know what? Do your civil duty and serve on the jury.
Right.
That'll
Or
be
you
my
could be
pitch for
virtually.
civil service for the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Um,
So that sort of encapsulates where we are at this point in the race with Republicans. As you mentioned, Trump didn't even get 50% of the vote. He enjoys less than that, but uh, you know, their efforts to suppress, to chip away at support for the Democratic candidate, for whether it was Biden in 2020 or Harris now. On the other side, Democrats are going to use Mark Robinson to try to chip away at support for Republican legislative candidates and Donald Trump. So we'll see. There's one ad on, as you mentioned, that put out by the Harris campaign, linking Trump and Robinson together, mainly about their abortion views, because Trump has tried to pivot to the middle on abortion, and Robinson has a long history of saying he wants to go pretty far with some abortion restrictions. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see if there are even more ads come out with Robinson's old comments.
yeah, in the middle of all this, even as like you mentioned earlier, the Republican Governors Association draws support from Robinson, says it's not going to put up any more ads. I mean, Josh Stein, he just recently held a fundraiser with Andy Beshear, the Kentucky governor and former vice presidential candidate, I guess. And then on Sunday, he'll be hosting another fundraiser with Josh Shapiro, the Pennsylvania governor, another person who was thought to be a VP. So he is still trying to run through the tape on this, and plans to have probably millions more dollars worth of ads on TV from now until the election. So like you said, 2020, Trump wins North Carolina by 75,000 votes. We saw, in 2016 in the governor's race, Roy Cooper won by only 10,000 votes. The Supreme Court Chief Justice race a few years ago between Paul Newby and Sherry Beasley, 2020, was 400 votes out of 5.5 million statewide. So this is a
Incredible.
state with a long history of these elections coming right down to the wire. I think it's going to be very similar again this year in the presidential race, at least. And we will still, we're going to wait and see what happens. There's going to be plenty more polling, out in the next few weeks. And obviously, like you said, these candidates are going to be here constantly trying to get those just couple of thousand voters who could make or break a campaign here in North Carolina.
Plenty to report on in the coming weeks, to be sure. No shortage of content for WRAL or WRAL.com.
No, not at all. So please stay tuned. We appreciate y'all listening and check in next time. This has been Will Doran with Pulse Bay for the Wrap.